listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me from an unusual locale this time, Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well.
Good. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, Kevin is not in his usual studio. We're gonna dive into where he's at, what he's doing, all that. Before we do that, follow us on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso. Find us everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. Okay, so Kevin, it's pretty obvious if you're listening to the show here. We are recording this on Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
What was Saturday night?
The Stadium Series.
Oh, okay. Is that where you are?
Yeah, so I'm pulling a roadie, as you mentioned before we started. So I am quite literally at this given moment, though I can't see it from my hotel room. I am quite literally across the street from MetLife Stadium, where, as we speak, there are preparations being made for another game. Because the Rangers and Islanders are playing there on Sunday afternoon. So there is another game. But obviously, I was here for the Saturday night portion of this weekend's Stadium Series. So, yeah, and I'm like a couple hours away from getting out of here and headed back to the usual area that I'm from on most occasions. So,
do you want to talk a little bit about the kind of the media experience? Like, you were there Friday for practice. We know you were in the booth for that. Being in the booth, like how does a football booth compare to a hockey booth, for example? Like, come on, give us the insider. Like, come on.
Sure. No, I know. I knew this was going to come to start with.
We'll get into the game, but like, you got to do a really cool thing this weekend. Let's talk about it.
Well, so I think things like this, it doesn't really formally, I guess it doesn't really formally set in what you're going to do until, at least for me, because I don't go on the road typically,
Right.
It's not something that I would typically do.
You're not traveling with the team.
Right. So when I left on Friday afternoon, I was going to leave a little earlier, honestly. They were supposed to practice at 2:00. They pushed the practice back by an hour. I was actually, I'm not even kidding when I say this, I was in the car ready to leave when I saw the email. So that updated the time. So I actually just went back into the house and just hung around for an extra hour because I was going to be super early if that was the case.
That's really
it doesn't really hit you that everything is here until, like, for me, I'm driving up. I'm kind of, once New York City came into sight line, and then really once MetLife Stadium comes into sight, you're like, all right, this is setting in that this is what's going on this weekend, kind of thing.
This is where I get to go to work on Saturday.
Right. I mean, and practice was fun. I mean, it seemed like they had their practice cut short because of the time difference that they pushed back, because it was supposed to be done this is going to be strange to even start with. The Islanders practiced on Thursday.
Yeah, weird.
And weren't going to play until Sunday. So that was already a weird thing. But the other three teams were practicing on Friday with 2-hour gaps in between. So the Flyers were going to go at 2:00, the Rangers went at 4:00, and the Devils went at 6:00. I think I had heard anyway that the Flyers were originally going to practice at 8:00 at night, and that got pushed back from John Tortorella, that they didn't want to go that late. So they bumped them up. Instead, they went ahead, and then there was sun glare issues, and that's what pushed back the practice. They basically got out there, and I'm not even kidding when I tell you this, they probably practiced for maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah, they got to the family time real quick because of how limited the whole session was.
Correct. And they made sure that, and Tortorella kind of talked regularly about Friday was going to be all about the families. That, they took a practice, they got a feel for the ice, but the rest of the day was going to be family time.
Of course.
And understood, it's a big deal. A lot of people had family coming in, things like that. So yes, absolutely. The experience of watching everything from a football press box. Now, I've done one of these before in a football stadium.
Right.
So I do have a little bit of a sense of how it goes. I think that what ends up happening, because first of all, a football press box is vastly different from just the typical of a hockey arena.
A ring of desks around the top of an arena.
Well, sure. But what I'm thinking of is that it's built for so many more people. And while this is a national scale event, don't get me wrong, you're talking about literally 4 rows of seating.
I mean, sure. How many
football?
It's incredible how enormous football is compared to hockey.
That takes up about the end zone of one side of the field
Oh, yeah.
to about midfield. I mean, it's not the width, like the press box at Wells Fargo Center literally runs the length of the ice.
Right.
There's two sides to it. The broadcast booths are in the middle. This is a little different, but still, it's, and you're talking about like even at Wells Fargo Center, it's 2 rows. There is a back row to the press box, usually reserved more for like scouts and team personnel and things like that. But it is what it is, kind of thing. You know what I mean? And if nothing else, the trickiest part of covering one of these games is just like the fans, you're kind of a mile away.
Yep.
So you're really struggling to see some things. And because you're also sitting indoors, legitimately, as nice as it is to not be in the cold that was, you can't hear anything. Like, you don't really get the banter of it. Now they did have the game broadcast playing in the press box, so you could hear it. But
obviously,
again,
time delay is a thing on that too.
Yeah. So it's delayed. You're trying to catch everything. I mean, like obviously you can tell when a team scores because maybe more or less you can tell by the reaction more than
the reaction
actually
on the
seeing
ice. Yeah.
I mean, there were a handful of times where I could actually physically see the puck go in, despite the fact that we're sitting so far away. But but it's a unique experience. And I mean, I think a greater part of the experience also is like once you go down there, and the players talk about this too, when they're in a football locker room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the locker rooms are massive
Enormous.
in a football stadium. So, and the Flyers had the Jets locker room for both the practice and the game. So that's where we were for a couple of things with that. And it's gigantic. I mean, for as many people that show up to cover these types of things, it still doesn't amount to near as much as I'm sure is in there on a typical Sunday.
Oh, I'm sure. It's crazy just how small time the NHL really is in the grand scheme of things. But but you were mentioning like being able to see things and kind of the visual perspective of being in the booth. How were the helmets? Because obviously, so we saw the Stadium Series jerseys last week or a couple of weeks ago, and we kind of had an idea of what they were going to look like. We figured maybe what the socks would look like. The helmets were a bit of a surprise. How did they look? Because on TV, I thought they looked really, really, really clean.
Well, that was probably the best look at them. I mean, I didn't have a detailed look at all. Now, I mean, if you want my opinion of what they looked like, because like I saw players filing in after practice on Friday, and they're obviously still have the gear on, so they did look pretty cool up close. But I didn't really, from my vantage point during a game, I had no real vantage point.
I mean, for you.
I mean, here's the thing too. As I'm watching warmups, I thought that I was going to have an easier time telling the Devils numbers than the Flyers numbers at first on the backs, just because I thought that the black against the red really kind of worked. And then during the game, it was the opposite. I actually saw the Flyers numbers better.
Yeah.
So and it's different. I'm not typically and like, listen, I don't know when the next time they even play in a game like this, so it's not something that you use on a daily basis.
Sure.
But like, this is the type of game where, from my perspective, I'd probably invest in a pair of binoculars. Typically, like I had kind of had that thought once I got there, but like, it's not something you think about on a regular basis. Like, it's not something that I need every day for my job. You know what I mean? Like,
right, of course.
So it just is what it is. Like, even, I know that there are other writers that will pull them out during practice, even because we don't have numbers on the backs of the jerseys at practice. It's just the helmet numbers, which are definitely smaller.
Right.
But even those, like, I can kind of wait for them to come down to the end where the window is at the training facility and still catch a number and not need them. But in this type of setting, it's totally different. I mean, the rest of the experience is great. It definitely was a unique experience to be staying in the general area of the stadium, as opposed to, because even when it was in Philly, I just stayed. I was still
at home, of course.
Well, yeah, I was still, I was just at home, so I just kind of bounced around a little bit, and made it was kind of easy to navigate. This you needed to be up in the area in some capacity. I'm glad I was.
You didn't want to deal with New York traffic 4 times in 2 days.
I don't know if I would have hit that much, honestly, trying to leave the general area if I left on Friday, because I would have been past rush hour by that point.
Oh,
I mean, let me put into perspective for you also, because this was just to give you an idea of what time kind of everything happened or whatever. So I showed up for the practice and picked up my credential at roughly 2:45. They were getting on the ice at 3. I had finally gotten it because I did hit a little bit of Friday traffic on that one.
Okay.
I didn't leave the stadium until probably about 8:00.
Oh, okay.
Because I hung around after media was done. Like, we were downstairs probably for about an hour just dealing with, flyers coming off the ice, that kind of thing. So I didn't leave the stadium until almost 8 that night to even go back and check into the hotel and then have like a quiet night at that point. The next day, now I didn't have to head over to the stadium on Saturday until about 5:00 was when the media entrance opened. I pretty much got there at about 4:45 to go in. So I was roughly that time frame. I did not leave and get back to my hotel room after the game was over until about 1:15 in the morning.
Oof, man.
Just because the game ended at about 11:15. We were still downstairs. I finally published the game recap at about midnight, stuck around for a little bit, did a quick hitter video type thing, all that type of stuff. And then, to be honest, like, once I was done with all of that, you even, like, after you kind of get packed up, you're kind of, especially since I'm not doing the Sunday portion, you're kind of taking a moment just to soak it in for a second one more time before you head out for good.
Absolutely.
So I did hang around, and then I didn't drive over to the stadium. I took a shuttle from the hotel, so I was waiting for that too. So, like, that's why it took another like half hour from when I left to kind of like, okay, find the shuttle, sit there and wait as they let other people come out and get on, and then get transported back to the hotel, kind of thing.
Right. Well, and I think that brings us to the game itself. So, unfortunately, the Flyers did not win that game.
Yeah. Yes.
The final score ended up as what, 6-3?
6-3. Yes.
6-3. The Devils win. You know what? It a neat, fun, stadium series venture. Yes, it is a lot of fun. I think it's good for the players. I think it's good for the families. I think it's good for the game, the broadcast, all of that. But at the end of the day, you're in a playoff race. The 2 points would have been really helpful. Nico Hischier comes out and scores 32 seconds into the game.
Yep.
It's you can't start that slow against this Devils team.
It's not that they started slow, honestly, because there's people who are sitting. I saw some comments like even about how you can't be that unprepared or whatever. I don't think they were unprepared in any way. It was they came out and they got overly aggressive from the jump. And I even tweeted out right before the game started, right after warmups, I'm curious how this is going to start, because usually these outdoor games are a feeling out process in the opening 20, trying to get a feel for the ice conditions in a game setting. Practice seemed great, and I will tell you the weather conditions for this one, unlike in Philly a few years back, these were ideal. I mean,
I was going to say the weather really cooperated.
It was cold and clear, and you couldn't have asked for anything better, honestly.
Cold, but not too cold, where you're getting like the weird skate stick stuff like you've had in some of the games.
I can't tell you if that was the case from like the player's perspective.
It didn't seem so.
The only issue with the temperature in that type of setting is that as snow builds up on the ice, it's not going anywhere. Right. And if you're getting these extended stretches of play where they aren't doing an ice scrape in the middle of this thing, then you're going to have trouble moving the puck as effectively as you want to, because it's just not going to go. There's just too much snow buildup. And so really right off the jump, though, I was curious. I'm like, especially because it was two scenarios, because obviously it could just they could have just come out full bore like they did, obviously. But like, I'm like, is it more of a feeling out process, or are we going to see two teams that, and the Flyers especially, they have to play aggressive? And then I look at, and my immediate thought was, I'm like, if the Flyers try to play that way, we know they want to take advantage of the rush, but New Jersey is equally as good a team off the rush. So we're going to see whether or not this is a settle-in first period, or is this going to be fire wagon because of all the way that these two teams play. And you got caught in a situation 32 seconds in where, let's face it, it looked like they might as well have been attacking the other way, because the two defensemen were in deepest and the three forwards were back. And Travis Konechny, probably just trying to play his position, goes and breaks from the blue line because he's a forward. And there's no defense back. So Nico Hischier sneaks behind everybody and just goes. And And
turns out he's pretty good when you leave him alone
and that's
that. Like,
well, and first of all, wait, as much as you look for a save from Sam Ersson on those situations because it is 1-on-1, so at least you could get a save there. What a way to like start the game. You're not even settled in. It's going to be the first shot of the game.
No, yeah, he definitely gives everybody a tap on the shins after that. Like, hey, thanks, boys. Thanks for letting me ease into this one.
Well, here's the thing too, right? So the parallels here to a we've talked about this game plenty of times, so you're gonna know where I'm going with it. But so 32 seconds in is the same timing as when Claude Giroux scored against Pittsburgh in that playoff game, right?
Okay.
Do you remember how that game started?
Sure, of course.
With a big hit, right?
Absolutely.
Travis Konechny decked a player 10 seconds into the game. Almost the same exact way, same exact spot, and the only difference was the team scoring 32 in was the opponent.
Other way.
Right. And because you were trying to come out and announce your presence right off the bat, and it backfired immediately. And I'm not gonna lie, like from my vantage point, because of the fact that it's 32 seconds into the game, and it's technically a Devils home game, right. For that matter too. I mean, the crowd was pretty 50-50, but I will still say, they obviously went way all out for the Devils in this case, like with the production and all stuff like that. As much as this is a team that fights back, and we're going to talk about that later with the other games of the week as well, as much as this is a resilient team, it felt like a loss as soon as that happened, just because it's like it's a tone setter. And
absolutely.
And you kind of knew what kind of game you were in for. And I'm not going to sit here and act like that dictated the way the rest of the game went to the point where it's like, oh, they weren't competitive in this game. It's not that at all. It was just, that was such a bad omen for the whole rest of the game that like, we're not even a minute in and you get scored on. Like,
right. And we've watched this team scrap and claw back all year. They've erased deficits. They've made comebacks. They've scraped points by in games that they shouldn't have.
Yes.
But man, 30 seconds in with a moment as big as it is, right? Like you say, it's a Devils home game. There's 4 times more people there than usual.
Right.
You're playing outdoors. You got to wear the Rocky sweaters coming into the stadium. Like you got to have a big day about it, right? We did a special practice yesterday. Like this is not a normal game. Like as much as the players will tell you in media, well, we're just, it's just 60 minutes of hockey, just got to play a normal game. It's just 2 points, blah, blah, blah. It's not a normal game.
No. The one guy I believe that from more than anybody is John Tortorella.
Oh, absolutely.
He can do without all of this.
He's a psychopath. He doesn't care where you're playing. He just.
Right. Yeah. But he's the one guy who I can sit there and consistently, I just want to get to the game. I just want to get to the game.
He would be just as passionate coaching 9-year-olds in Nanaimo, like 100%.
Well, and this is the thing too, because as the game progresses, like that first goal is really what does you in, because you can even be trailing 1-0 out of that first period if you give up the second goal as the first one, the way that the second goal, especially when you're like 13 minutes in, it's like, okay, there was a time to feel it out, even if it was 10 minutes. Let's kind of
now you're just down a goal, no big
right
deal.
Now you're just down a goal, and you kind of know what to do. Like I looked at the way that they played out of that first period, and just wasn't overly impressed. It was like, the opening goal shell shocked them a little bit, and now they had to regroup. And I felt like you knew, because like my point was after the first period was all John Tortorella talked about, especially, but the players mentioned it too, was this is an important 2 points on the line.
Yes.
So being down 2-0, no matter what the circumstances are, is not going to sit well in the room. So I kind of imagine Tortorella was probably giving it to him a little bit after the first period. And the second period was for 75% of that period was pretty much domination by the Flyers. They set an outdoor game record. They had 27 shots on goal in the second period.
Whew. Is that good?
They came out just as a shooting gallery. They had 9 shots in the first period. They come out in the second and just start firing away.
Yep.
And the timing of their first goal by Owen Tippett was great. You're not even halfway through. You get it back to 2-1. You're pushing. It's looking really good. And right after it, too, they got a power play. And it's like, this is really shaping up to be like it's shaping up. And this was one of the major turning points of the game is Travis Konechny took a retaliation penalty.
Yep.
getting frustrated and taking it out on somebody who was kind of giving it to him, because Brendan Smith was kind of under his skin all night. And
sometimes you're Travis Konechny, sometimes you're Evgeny Malkin.
Well, and here's the thing. I know John Tortorella after the game was not going to bury him with that's how he plays. It's, that's the give and take of his game.
Right.
Konechny's got to be smart. And I think he kind of admitted that after the game. He knows it. But at the same time, that was a turning point because that started things off. You had that penalty. They took another penalty in the period. And not long after that penalty was when this barrage of scoring started. And unfortunately for the Flyers, and this is where I start putting more of the blame on Ersson a little bit. I'm not trying to blame him for the whole result, but I didn't care about him giving up a breakaway goal where Nico Hischier, a skilled player, an all-star,
right. A number 1 overall pick,
puts a move on you and goes 5-hole, especially 30 seconds into the game. You're kind of you didn't have time to get your feet wet even.
I think that's the first shot he saw also.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
hard to give Sam Ersson too much.
Right. So I'm not faulting him on that one. And I'm not really faulting him on the first rebound because, again, it looked like a purposeful shot that goes off the pad, comes out. No, they didn't cover properly.
The old pass off pads.
But if Morgan Frost is covering that play properly, not to put a specific on it, they all got out of sorts, but that's Morgan Frost's guy. And if Toffoli's completely unmarked, so he just puts it into an empty net and there's nothing Ersson can do. I can't fault him really for that one either.
Yep.
But the third one, it's another rebound. You start to get a little bit concerned about the rebound control, but
we'd like to see you smother those.
Well, here's the problem. I saw a lot of comments floating around also about how bad his rebound control was. Yeah, you know what? In that game, sure it was. But I think that's also the conditions again. You're playing in a different rink. The outdoor conditions mean everything is a little bit more frozen than it normally is. The puck's bouncing.
Well, sure. And even beyond that, your sight lines are weird, your angles are weird, your board play is weird.
Comments like that, and I'm not trying to that's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to take heat off of Ersson. I want him to control the rebound on the third goal too. But I'm sitting there going, you do it. You know what I mean? You stop a puck that's bouncing around on a frozen ice surface that's outdoors in 20 degree weather. Let's call it like it is. I know that they said the actual temperature at puck drop was 30 degrees.
Yeah,
but wind chill was a factor.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
So you stop it in that situation and control your rebound. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's one of those things. But yeah, sure. Would you like to see it at that spot? Sure. Because the problem was too, at one point in time, they were out shooting the Devils in the second period, 21-5.
Yep.
So you were giving them nothing. And that power, and basically the two penalties you took, the one that knocks it down to 4-on-4 with Konechny out there or in the box for the retaliation penalty, and then the power play that the Devils don't score on, but find a way to score shortly after. That really brought them back to life in the period.
Yeah.
And then literally almost next shift, it might have been 2 shifts after they score the third one, which kind of makes you think, oh boy, okay, now it's right back to 2. They get another one, and that's really the one that I want to say.
That's the dagger goal.
Yeah. It is. Well, you know what though? No, it's not, because I called the third one backbreaking because you've dominated the period to this point, but you gave up the next goal. That's where the game turns.
But to me, this team has been resilient enough, and John Tortorella has turned this team enough that a 2-goal deficit in the second period there, with that much time left, I trust them to get one back like they did. And then all of a sudden you go into the third period and you're only down a goal.
All right.
To me, it's really that fourth goal, because all of a sudden now you're down 3, and even getting one back, you still have a multi-goal hole going into the third.
So here's my thinking of it then, because you're not wrong about the 3-1 deficit, that it's not impossible, obviously.
Especially with that much time left.
Here was my feeling about that goal was, it felt like what could be a backbreaker because of the fact that it was so late in the period. There's under 4 minutes to go in the period, and you've done everything right to that point. You're in this thing. It's 2-1. Yeah, the slow start happened, but you're in it and you're controlling play in the second period. It looks like you're going to knock on the door for, even if you come out of the second period still trailing 2-1. You've been knocking on the door. You do the same thing in the second. In the third as you did in the second. You probably find a way to tie this up.
Oh yeah.
But the third one to me kind of took all of that good momentum they were building and crushed it right there. And at that point, then you're trying to get out of the thing down 2 at most.
Right.
And they score again. And that, to me, that was the one that, like, that's why I say that was the one where I really wanted to save, because it seems clean. It doesn't seem like there's anything, anything that should be threatening on that goal.
Right.
And it happens. And that really felt like it's weird though, because it feels like game at that point. But then they score on a power play before the end of the period, and Tippett gets another one, and you're like, okay,
all of a sudden
you know
what?
But well, you go, yeah, because then you're thinking, if they score the first one of the third period, this is, you're looking at another one of these games. They may not win it because you've given up 4. That's it's challenging.
Less
You don't
than
want to give up
ideal.
4, right? So they may not win it, but you're gonna have a shot because it's 2 goals. So who knows?
And you watch this team, obviously we'll get into it a little bit later, but we watched this team come back from multi-goal leads this week. Like, we've seen it happen. We have literal recent reason to believe.
If the 4-1 deficit wasn't the dagger, Heischer scoring again less than 3 minutes into the third definitely
really was.
Because at that point in time, you're looking at an uphill battle. And yet, like, you're thinking with the way that this team does rally back when they get another one, like Nick Seeler's goal came at a perfect time.
Oh, when Nick Seeler scored, everyone goes, okay, you got plenty of time left.
Because you had near 11 minutes and it's a 2-goal game. That is doable in today's NHL. It's the way that it is. It's not like in the 90s when a 2-goal deficit in the third period was like near insurmountable.
Shut it down and we're done.
Right.
Start the bus.
Right. So my biggest problem with because at this point I don't need to go through much more. They scored an empty netter at the end. Obviously, that's how we got to where we were. So that's the end of that.
That's right.
I mean, they kind of needed, like, when they got down to it, and as much as I kept in the back of my mind, hey, listen, the last time I watched one of these in person, they were trailing by 2 with basically 3 minutes left and won that game too. So it's not like it's impossible, but I'm watching the thing and I'm going, it just, like, now it turned into the tight checking game all of a sudden. You know what I mean? Like, or at least not even the tight checking. It's just, think about it. You're trying to empty the tank when you're down 2 with under 10 minutes to go. And you've been playing in 20, 25 degree weather, basically, for 2 hours. And you're trying, that's where the elements do kick in, because it's the outside air. You're probably breathing heavy. It's going to be tough. And this is where, in a game like this, they've got to figure this lineup stuff out.
Yeah.
Because the 11-7 thing is kind of becoming a joke. In a sense, like, I get you don't want to pull defensemen out of the lineup. I totally 1,000% get that. And you're in a position right now with the deadline coming up where you're trying to showcase people. Like let's face it. And we don't have a tab for this, so I'm touching on it briefly because people probably already know it by now anyway. Tyson Forrester's hurt. Rasmus Ristolainen's hurt. I think Forrester's closer to coming back. I think he actually probably had a shot to play at one point in time this weekend.
Ristolainen is looking to miss at least a couple of weeks, maybe in excess of a month.
Now, for what it's worth, Forrester's still in a walking boot, so take that for what it is. It may just still be. I mean, they've got 3 days now between games, so even if they sit there and they go, he can't play against Chicago, he might be back by the Ranger game. Honestly, if it just takes another week to kind of heal up whatever it is.
Well, exactly. You leave him at home, let him rest, and then bring him back against New York.
But Rasmus Ristolainen, well, if that's how it goes, they really haven't given a formal update. They just go on day to day. But Ristolainen's injury may be good news for the Flyers in a sense that it's allowed them to get Mark Stahl in 2 games, and he hasn't been a complete liability. So there's value there that if you wanted to try to move him, it's not like this is a guy who for 2 months has been sitting as a healthy scratch every single time out.
Right. Well, and so there has been a recurring bit on the Steve Dangle podcast lately where they're talking about their own lineup decisions, and we'll talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs in a minute here. But they're talking about their own line decisions, and Steve's theory is that Sheldon Keefe is doing certain things as a message to Brad Treliving, as in, hey, Brad, trade these guys. They're not very good. And he's just screaming in frustration, Brad! And it certainly seems like John Tortorella is doing a little bit of that with Danny Briere. because a couple of times he's been like, well, we have a lot of defensemen. Well, we have so many defensemen. Well, there's a lot of defensemen on this team, and I kind of have to play all of the defensemen I have.
Well, I'll counter that, because when Ristolainen was part of the lineup, I understood it.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at the 7 and you're going, who do you take out?
Exactly.
You want to play York, Sanheim, Drysdale, Zamula. You should want to every single night.
And the fact that John Tortorella hasn't taken the easy way out and just scratched Zamula.
Well, he did a couple times, but
But
it's not every night. Yeah, it's not every night. I'll give you that. And then
he's willing to go 11-7 to play Igor Zamula, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, actually, I'll give you that, because that's not the guy that
because he could easily just go to 6.
Well, because that's not the guy we need to talk about in the 11-7 from at least from last night. So, those four you have to play, and then Sealer and Walker have done nothing to come out of the lineup. In fact, you also don't want to take them out because they're trade candidates. So Ristolainen, and then Ristolainen kind of falls into like both categories because he's got a longer term contract, but he's also been talked about in trade conversation.
Sure.
Not anymore, obviously.
Well, right.
The injury is going to nix that.
Yeah, and I think that was one of those things. So every once in a while, you'll hear an organization you'll hear something leak, and it seems like the organization may be gauging some interest.
Right.
And when I heard Rasmus Ristolainen's name getting floated out there, to me, that sounded like somebody in the Flyers organization floated this rumor just to see if there was any traction on Rasmus Ristolainen.
I don't know about that.
Maybe there really is something there, but I don't necessarily know that we hear about it if the team's not trying to gauge some interest. I'll put it like that.
I understand where you're coming from. I think the reason why his name is out, well, I'll tell you the reason why his name's out there, because, and one way, I mean, not, I want to say one way or the other, because it doesn't mean that, like, we don't know yet if the Flyers are definitively making the playoffs. If they were, hold on, if they were to, then, like, if they were to hold this position, then you could make an argument that it could happen with them or it could have happened with somebody else. But there's there's this big conversation about playoff Ristolainen, that a guy like that is built for playoff hockey, right? Yeah. And but he's never seen it. Right. Because all the years in Buffalo and then coming to Philly, and they never made the playoffs in that situation either. So he's never seen it. So you're talking about a guy who, like, the people
you're talking about buying something sight unseen.
Well, you are, but like what I'm saying is that you're talking about a guy whose style of play and build people think is made for the playoffs, but we've never seen it. So there's an automatic value that's put on him because that's the belief. And the challenging part is he's got a contract
for several more years.
Right. It's which just like, I don't doubt for a second you're going to hear his name, or at least if something were to happen in the offseason, I'll say it that way, I wouldn't be shocked. I just wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me one way or the other. If they kept him, I understand, because it's a big contract. If they didn't, and they found a way to move the contract because it's the offseason, I understand it too.
Man, if they can find a way to move that contract, and
they've got to make a decision to an extent.
And I have softened on my Rasmus Ristolainen takes, right? Like, if you were listening to this show when he got traded here, I was vehemently against. I still think it was an overpay. I think the trade was an overpay. I think moving other assets to facilitate that trade was an overpay. I think the contract was an overpay, all of that. But the player, since he's been here, has played pretty well. Not always necessarily up to the money, but pretty well. And for me, if you can move the contract, I'm very happy with that. I'm not necessarily happy about moving the player, but unfortunately, that's the cost of doing business. Chuck signed a bad deal. Wasn't the only one he signed.
Fair enough. Here's my thing with this, and I kind of, because like right away there were also, like, I had comments coming in about how, like, this, losing this game only affirms that they really need to sell guys at the deadline, and Walker should go and Lawton should go, like the guys we've already talked about. Here's my thing here, and I've said this before about the trade deadline. they're in a position, maybe with Walker, I understand it. Like Walker's going to be the easiest piece to move out of this group that gets you back to here's our group of 6.
I entirely agree. I don't think you can move Scott Lawton.
Okay. It's not, I don't think you can.
I don't think you should.
It's not even, I don't think you should. Here's the real simple answer. They don't have to.
Oh, they certainly don't have to.
And because they don't have to, they have leverage in the sense that how bad do you want them then? Because you go to another team and say, listen, we don't want to do this. But if you're going to give us exactly what we want or more, we'll do it. Because now we're moving in a further direction. So in other words, you get a first round pick and maybe a little something extra to make the money work or something. Sure, you can have Scott Lawton for the next 2 years beyond the trade. If that's what you want to give us. But if you don't want to give us a first round pick for Scott Lawton,
you're not getting him.
Right. We're not trading him because he's part of our leadership group and we don't want to do this. That's the way Danny Briere is probably talking.
I'm so glad you used that word. Okay. Because you just mentioned playoff Rasmus Ristolainen and how that is an unknown entity that no one has ever really seen.
Right.
I've seen Scott Lawton in the playoffs, man. Like, and I'm not talking about necessarily from a production goal scoring perspective. I'm talking about a desire, drive, motivation,
the fiery side,
leadership. Yeah. The word you use there is that he's part of the leadership group. And obviously we have a little bit of an update on the leadership group that we'll be getting to in a second here. Mm-hmm. But to me, you keep Scott Lawton because not only I think he helps your roster, obviously, and he's going to, if you're going to make the playoffs, you are more likely to win a first round with Scott Lawton on your team than you would be without Scott Lawton on your team.
Right.
But to me, he's there to fire up the team with a locker room speech after the second period when you're down 2 goals in game 4. Like, he's the guy who kicks you in the face and gets you going. And it's not even necessarily for him or for the current team. It's for the young guys, right? This is the year you show Cam York what the playoffs look like. This is the year you show Tyson Forster, Bobby Brink, like all these guys, what the playoffs look like.
Yeah, I get it. I know.
And with Scott Lawton driving the bus, or at the very least sitting up front, turning around, barking at people, that's how you build winning culture long term.
Sure, it is. And the only reason I'm on board with even trading him is the fact that I legitimately think you could get something seriously valuable here. Because
I get that.
Because A, the market has dictated that even a player like Scott Lawton is going to be worth a first potentially because other players have already gotten it. I'm sorry, if Sean Monahan got a first round pick from Montreal from Winnipeg, then Scott Lawton can get a first round pick. That's how I look at it.
I know
Monahan's got more points and I get that, but you're getting somebody like
Scott Lawton's a better two-way player.
Well, and I'm not even going off of play. I don't even care. It's not even about the level of play or what each guy does well or whatever it is. You're not getting Scott Lawton for 2 months. You're getting him for 2 more years if this happens.
That's true.
You're giving back something that helps. If I'm Danny Briere, I'm sitting there going, and you're giving me back something that helps me for 2 more years also, one way or another, whether it's I'm developing a kid for 2 years and then getting him here or whatever the case may be. But I'm not giving you Scott Lawton for a third.
Hot take here.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that Scott Lawton's not a top 5 room guy in the NHL.
I believe that to an extent. I mean, yeah, I understand where you're coming from.
If you want to fight me in the comments, I'll give you top 10. But you're not getting any worse than that out of me. But okay, so I mentioned
but there's a reason that there's interest, and I guess to put a bow on the game before you get to the topic I know you want to get to.
Absolutely.
The only downside to the rest of the game, like we don't need to go through this, but the only downside is that of the opportunity it was because you like when I'm optimistic on this show.
Yes.
They obviously lost the game in regulation, so you're not getting an optimistic statement or an affirmative statement from me on this. But if the roles are reversed, if they come out and they play this game the way that we assume they could and all stuff like that, if they would have won this game in regulation to go up 9 points
on a playoff
on the Devils and pretty much put that kind of distance between them, I don't think they would have been up 9 points.
We'd be talking first round playoff matchups.
Well, I don't think they would. I don't think they would have gone up 9 points on the playoffs, because I think that the it would have kept the Devils behind the Islanders again, I think, or something like that. I don't. Yeah. It's something like that.
No. The Islanders.
No, I'm sorry. No. The
Islanders have
win today to get with it. Right. Yeah. Never mind. I'm sorry. So it would have been 9. So I would have told you
8 points clear of the Islanders in the playoff spot right now.
And I know there's still 26 games left, so there's a lot of. I get it. There's a lot of time. I mean, 26 games. That's why I sit there and I look at it and go, this doesn't destroy the playoffs.
Not at all. Obviously, there's still 5 points clear.
Now it could be a turning point. I'll give you that. It could be a turning point where we look back and we say this was a game that they let get away from them from the very beginning. But if they would have won, I would have told you they're making the playoffs. I would have actually made that an affirmative statement.
I don't disagree with that, but I also want to pump the brakes a little bit because they were on a 6-game point streak. They had just come off a 5-game point streak, and had just come off a 4-game win streak, kind of the game prior. So, I'm not saying you're wrong. I know that they have to kind of hold pace and blah, 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 but the Flyers still won 1-1 this week. It's not like it was a bad week, No,
I know. And that's why I said I'm not pulling, I'm not going the way we were,
the other way, right?
Right. It's just, it wasn't, if you're trying to sit here, and I know Tortorella kind of tried to shrug that off, come on, there's still 20, there's still more than a quarter of the season left.
Right. And the nice thing is you have a couple days off and then a soft Chicago opponent. So you get to work your way back into it.
Well, and this is the thing. This is actually the one thing Tortorella said that I will agree with 1,000%. That was post game, because he even said he's kind of he even said that the Chicago game, at least for now, on the surface, I guess, just looking at it.
Oh, it's a big game.
Almost worries him a little bit, because you know what? Now you go from playing the outdoor spectacle to it's back to being just a normal situation.
You're on playing the road in arena. Chicago in a half-empty building,
and it is 1,000% a trap game.
Oh yeah,
this is one of those ones where if you let any of this stuff linger, you should not be losing to this Chicago team. But that's especially because I look at the way they played the Devils and I go, good, kind of good luck with the Rangers next week. And I know I'm skipping a game there, but it's you don't win the Chicago game, you're looking at trouble with a weekend back-to-back with the Rangers in Pittsburgh, and the Rangers have your number.
Mm-hmm.
I can't take away from that.
Into the looking ahead, yeah. Okay.
The Pittsburgh game's a little different, but that Chicago game's got trap written all over it. So just be mindful. But that's what I'm saying. It was a missed opportunity to really put some distance on you, and then.
Well, one of the ways that the Flyers can avoid a trap game there is by really relying on their leadership.
Yeah, with leadership. So let's get to the big news.
How much of this, before we get into it here, how much of this was the NHL saying you need a captain for the Stadium Series game?
I don't think it was.
Okay, because I don't know why else you do it on the road in Toronto with three road games in a row ahead of you.
Well, because let's put
weird timing.
I know. Well, because you can sit there and say how much this was the NHL. I don't think John Tortorella cares.
Okay.
He's not going to let the league dictate what, where they are in this process, I guess, of naming somebody or not. At least Scott Lawton's got a letter. You know what I mean? To that point. So it's listen, do with that what you will.
And then as far as the headline goes here, Sean Couturier has been named the 20th captain in Philadelphia Flyers history, the first since Claude Giroux was traded in March of 2021. Mm-hmm. Almost 3 years without a captain, which is insane to think about. But yeah, Sean Couturier has got 7 years left on his contract. He is going to be in town for very likely the rest of his career, at the very least, most of the rest of it at this point.
Sure.
And quite frankly, 14's probably going to the rafters at some point in the future.
I'm not going to go that far yet. Just because he's a captain and played here a long time doesn't mean you get your number retired.
I have enough faith. I have enough faith in where this team is going over the next 3 to 5 years, presumably under his captainship, that I'm gonna go ahead and be the first to say it. 14 will get retired one day.
That's fine. I disagree with you.
Okay. I mean, if they win a cup in 2 years, that changes the conversation drastically.
Correct. I get it. I'm saying I disagree with you because of the fact that he, to me, is. I'm not trying to compare players here, but if you look at captains in franchise history, Like, I look at Couturier a little bit like a Dave Poulin type of captain or something like that, where it's like, yeah, people fondly remember Dave Poulin, but it doesn't mean he was an all-time
He
flyer
wasn't the
great.
guy, right?
No, but he just wasn't an all-time flyer great like that. Like,
Okay.
yeah, he is, but he's not. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not taking away from the fact that like Dave Poulin had a huge role in cup teams and things like the cup final teams, but
I think just a little baby bit you're disrespecting Sean Couturier. Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
I'm just trying. No, I'm being real. I'm just being real.
How many legitimately, how many Flyers have won major awards?
I hear you. I get it.
Like, and how many since 1985, for example?
Okay, but like Ron Hextall won a Conn Smythe in a losing effort and a Vezina, and his number's not up there.
Yeah, but I think that's just because the organization's kind of mad at him.
They could have also.
I think that has more to do with Ron Hextall than the Philadelphia Flyers.
Okay, fine. Maybe with where you're going since he was fired, maybe as a general manager. My point is that beforehand it could have happened then. You know, you could have. I mean, first of all, you got to remember something. They typically have reserved this for Hockey Hall of Famers.
That's true.
And it's very it's a very exclusive club. I mean,
you're right. And I have spoken vehemently on the subject of jersey retirement on this show before. And now that I'm thinking about it a little bit, at this point in time, it's probably a little bit early to call that. You're right.
It just is what it is. And to be fair, I don't ever know if Couturier is going to return to his previous production standpoint. He's having a solid production year, especially for missing 2 seasons roughly. But it's not like he's like. The reason why we could talk about Claude Giroux the way we did is as a captain of the team, and honestly, despite the lack of playoff success, is because he played 1,000 games with the team and had 900 points.
Yep,
that's a lot. I look at Sean Couturier in however many he's in his 12th season. He doesn't even have 500 career points yet.
Oh, man. Okay, and you know the answer. You know what I'm going to say. You know what I'm going to say.
Because he's been hurt so much?
No, that's not his game. He didn't start scoring until he was 26.
But then by that logic, like you're trying to because you're going to sit there and say because he's a Selke Trophy winner that that matters significantly. Like at that rate, then Rod Brindamore, who was that kind of a two-way player, should have also gotten his number retired based on the way you're talking. You know what I mean?
I'm going to throw something out there. First of all, I think if Rod played his whole career here, he would be a contender to get his number retired.
If Rod played his whole career here, he would have been a head coach here by now.
Yeah, correct. Maybe a general manager, honestly.
Nah, stick to him as the coaching type.
That's valid. Okay, so if we fast forward 5-6 years into the future and Sean Couturier is 36, still the captain, but they have won a cup.
That part I'll level with.
I think the rest of his career crystallizes in a really romantic way, right? Then you get to talk about him coming in as a rookie against the Penguins. You get to talk about him, carrying the team against the Penguins in 2018, whatever year that series was.
Yeah, I know. You're talking about
where he scores on one leg.
Mm-hmm. Scored the game winner of game 5 to get it to game 6, and then had a hat trick and 5 points in game 6. I get it.
And that's the sort of moment that down the road, when you're looking back on your career, if you have the accomplishments, that's the sort of moment that really crystallizes with people.
I'm not taking away from that at all, but let's just say they still to go back to the Poulin comparison to an extent that I'm making. Dave Poulin scored shorthanded on a 5-on-3 in a clinching game to get the Flyers to the Stanley Cup final.
Right.
And it doesn't put your number in the rafters because you have a key headlining moment. You're
right. That's all I'm saying. I have backed off this a little bit since I originally said it. I have immediately backtracked.
Now you want to make a case for Flyers Hall of Famer down the stretch?
Oh,
I'll give
I think that's locked up now.
Right.
They open the Ring of Honor up 3rd season in. They're like, all right, you're going to be in the Ring of Honor one day. Just,
that's where I agree with that type of stuff because he's already well within the top 10 of games played.
And then I did also just want to mention, just kind of putting a cap on this a little bit. We do still have a little bit more to talk about before we get out of here. Part of the same little media blitz here was that Travis Konechny also got an A.
Right.
So your captaincy group, your leadership group, at least for now, is rounded out. You have Sean Couturier wearing the C, Travis Konechny and Scott Lawton with the A's.
So So, and hear me out, because this ties into a previous conversation. So hear me out, because I know you're going to hate this conversation.
Okay.
But again, this is just me being around. I'm not saying that I'm, not insider information here or anything like that. But optics. This is what that's how I'll put this. Optics.
Okay.
Why would you give Travis Konechny a letter in February of a year where you have the opportunity, when it's over, to extend him if you were going to trade him?
I don't think you're trading him. I think that's what.
Nah, you don't say.
You're right. I think that's what Danny Briere is saying here. I think he's saying.
I think there's a contract waiting to be signed on July 1st, practically.
And you know what? Honestly,
I'm not saying or at least that they're discussing. You know what I mean?
I think the Flyers fans need a little bit of jersey buying stability at this point. Like here's a jersey,
definitely one now.
Right. We just threw out we just repurposed a whole bunch of 9 jerseys. We just threw out a whole bunch of 79 jerseys. We need some good. You can go buy your 11s. You can hold on to him. He's going to be here.
It sure sounds like it. Like, yeah. I'm not sitting here telling you that that they've got the contract ready to go, kind of thing. But like,
they're trading him tomorrow, aren't they?
What? No, but no, they're not. But you're not going to tell me that doesn't read as that's a priority in the offseason.
This almost looks like a pre-contract. Yeah, this is like a soft pre-contract offer.
Well, I mean, like, even down to and I believe I saw this tweeted from Charlie O'Connor, so I want to give the credit, because I don't want to just make this my own thought, but it's a valid point. Owen Tippett scores 2 goals last night and gets to 21 on the season. Clearly was like pretty much the best forward that the team had, because of his scoring prowess in those situations and whatnot. And you're sitting there going, you don't even have to worry about, oh, look, he might be heating up. What's that going to do for his contract value? It's done. It's done. His value is what it is. They've already gotten it done. He's got 8 years on the contract after this season.
Yep.
Let him go off.
Absolutely.
And while Konechny doesn't, I think Konechny's also knowledgeable enough to not go overboard with it. Like, let's face it, you're probably going to end up paying the guy at least $9 million.
Probably.
He is your best. On a typical night,
Elliot Friedman did come out and mention a contract extension and noted it on a recent 32 Thoughts podcast and said that it's going to be a big number.
Sure it is. Because night in, just strictly from a night in, night out basis. I'm not saying
he's your best player.
Right. He's the best player on the team.
He's like, at very minimum, your best forward.
Exactly. And not even just that, but it's like, not that, like, because I don't like that. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't have to be doesn't have to be, but it's not that he's your best player every single night. Like, that's never going to happen that way. But
that's just not how the league works.
Right. No, but most nights he's the guy you have an eye on. And even last night, he's got 2 assists on the Tippett goals. So he's still producing at a high enough rate that he's got to be going. You're going to pay that. You're going to pay that guy if he's that much of a catalyst to your success.
Absolutely. So, he's got a real chance of being low rent Austin Matthews.
And he's going to be paid like an all-star. He's not going to be paid like a superstar. And the reason I say not paid like a superstar is because I don't think the Flyers will go and top 10 million.
Right.
But I do think they'll have to top 9 to get it there, because you're not just thinking about the value next year or 2 years. You're buying 2
UFA years. You're buying his prime.
Well, and remember, you're trying to do this a year in advance, so he'd still make 5.5 next year.
Yep.
And then after that, you're trying to get ahead of it. So you're thinking, what if
If he takes another step forward, he might score 40 next year, making 5.5. Which is insane.
It's possible. Yeah, sure. It's possible. And that's all I'm saying. So
you start talking about best contracts in the league at that point.
Okay. But so this is the part of the conversation you're not going to like, because I didn't really even get to it. If you give Travis Konechny a letter right now, you're pretty much saying he's part of this thing. He's part of the future. As much
Does
as
his agent bring that to the negotiating table?
No, I think they're already talking anyway, so I don't think it's much of it. I don't think it's that big of a deal, like one way or the other. Like,
it was probably discussed in terms of the contract before it happened.
To me, it doesn't matter. He was going to make money one way or the other. I don't think that you're bringing to the table, well, he's got a letter, you got to pay him.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's, if nothing else, the reason you've got to pay him is he's your best forward most nights. Simple as that. And he's the catalyst of this thing.
True.
When he's going, they have a shot to win every single time he's going because of how effective he is, especially in all situations now. But because you give him a letter now, I don't feel like that's that's an indication. I don't feel like you're interested in moving him at all. Like at one point in time, I wondered, would they try to sell him even, because that could get you your biggest package in return, even if it's really hard to do. I mean, if it's hard to trade Scott Lawton, it's really hard to trade Travis Konechny from a thought process standpoint. So now I think he's 1,000% safe the way that goes, because you wouldn't put a letter on him and then say, well, we're trading you in 2 weeks.
No. I think once you sign this
I don't even think you do it in the offseason at that point, because why would you do it for the rest of this year and then say you trade him? I just don't see it happening.
No, like I said, this is a pre-contract
extension. But a thing that people have wondered is, because Scott Lawton's name has been in the trade rumor so much, is when he was the only guy with a letter, how do you trade the only guy with a letter?
Well, now you got two other guys with a letter.
Well, now he's not. So would it be as much of a culture shock to the room that your de facto captain, because you didn't have one, is here today, gone tomorrow? I don't think it would be as much. I think that is it's almost designed to potentially soften the blow if a guy like that leaves the room, because it's not like you're turning to nobody. You're turning to Sean Couturier as the captain, Travis Konechny's an alternate, and that's the way that it is.
Right. I mean, if Lawton's your only letter and you trade him, all of a sudden there's this weird vacuum there.
Yeah. Exactly. And now you have somebody to look at. And to be fair, I wonder if that's the reason why it's Couturier, because for a while it looked like it was true, but for a while it looked like if anybody's going to get it, it's going to be Lawton. He's the only one with a letter.
Sure.
So you feel like, if nothing else,
a logical conclusion.
Well, if nothing else, you would have probably thought that it was going to be reversed.
Right.
That you would just promote Lawton to the captaincy, and then you would say, let's throw an A back on Sean Couturier, who's been one before, and an A on maybe, Konechny's fair. I'm not I can't really think of anybody else who would have gotten one or anything like that. So, I mean, obviously there's a few guys who you could look at from a veteran standpoint. I get that, but
no, I think logically it makes a lot of sense. Especially, less than a week after John Tortorella comes out and praises the guy for shoving it in his face. It really is
that was perfect timing.
It's the most John Tortorella move to give that press conference and then give the guy a C.
Yeah,
it's great. It is fantastic.
Well, and in fairness for the timing, I think the purpose of the timing was, does the guy even stay on the ice?
Right.
You had to get through nearly 3/4 of your season, at least. Actually, Saturday's game was 2/3. Saturday's game is 2/3 essentially.
He had to prove that he was in playing shape, and he has.
Right.
I know he took a couple of maintenance days early in the season, but
and then had kind of had a scare in the Toronto game this week too, because that looked bad at the beginning. Obviously, you're thinking par for the course, right? Because it's not an injury that you go, oh, he hurt his back again or tweaked something in a knee or something like that. It wasn't a mobility thing. He got slashed. Straight up got slashed in an area where there's not a lot of padding or no padding at all. And it's great. A slash is going to take him out of the Stadium Series game that really should have been called, by the way.
Right. And by the way, since we're here, we should probably talk about this Toronto game a little bit. Because
let's go to the other games.
Yeah, we'll kind of blow through it here real quick. Kevin's actually got to check out of his hotel room, so we are up against a little bit of a time crunch.
Well, I have time for that. I got a couple other things to take care of before I head out.
So anyway, the Flyers are pushing in the first period, pushing. They take a penalty, give all the momentum away, and then bang, Travis Konechny shorthanded.
Yeah, I know, right?
Or I'm not sorry, Travis Sanheim shorthanded.
It was almost Travis Konechny.
It was
Travis Konechny
almost
hit the
Travis
post.
Konechny. And then it dipsy doodles around. For some reason, all 5 Leafs go to the boards where Travis Konechny is. The puck squirts out to Travis Sanheim.
That was like the East-West version of the Nico Hischier goal on Saturday. Everybody just goes to one side of the ice and leaves Travis Sanheim alone. And like, listen, it was another, if nothing else, this was a more competitive version of all of those other games that the Flyers have lost to a superstar, because you played 30 minutes of some of the most effective hockey I think I've seen this team play.
Oh yeah.
And then Austin Matthews took matters into his own hands. And now, in fairness, it wasn't the first time that Austin Matthews had a hat, or it wasn't the only hat trick that Austin Matthews had this week.
No, Austin Matthews is a mutant. He's a mutant. He's not human. Cast him for the X-Men movie. Call Professor Xavier. Whatever X-Men joke you want to make. He's a mutant.
Like and again, I love the people who come out and sit there and say, Sam Harrison started that game. I love the people who are going to sit there and go, some of those shots were from further out. However, would you like to watch, someone put these people in front of Austin Matthews highlights for an hour?
Stop
it. And like the third, look at the goal he scores the hat trick on.
He's the best goal scorer in the game.
Sure he is. To change the angle, he pulls the puck in to change the angle. And how is a goalie supposed to try to track that? Like, sometimes you do. And for what it's worth, from pretty much that point on until it got to overtime, they were looking for Matthews for a fourth.
Absolutely.
And Harrison did make the saves on some of those. I'm saying some because some of them, I think a couple of them missed the net, but you know what I mean? Right. Like it could have been Matthews that put this thing away before it ever got to overtime. And for what it's worth,
5 or 6 the way he was playing.
And for what it's worth, because he only had 3 and the door, I know. Because he was the offense for the entire team until overtime. You were still in the game, and it gave you a chance with 5 minutes left to pull off a rally.
Yep. You get Garnet Hathaway, you get Travis.
That was a great point.
Oh yeah, that's a huge point. You beat Arizona on Monday. We'll talk about that game briefly in a second. You come into this game with a 4-game winning streak. You're down 3-1 with 6 minutes to go, and you're going, man, well, it's a nice little win streak, but I guess that's over. And the boys go, no. Mm-hmm. We're coming back.
Yeah, so, by the way, the overtime of that was a very 22-23 overtime.
You can't just
not touch the puck at all.
You can't possibly expect the Flyers to beat the Leafs in overtime. Like, just the way the 3-on-3 is lined up, the way that roster is assembled. We talk about Flyers having these big game changer players. The Leafs have about 4 of them.
I will tell you the way that you beat the Leafs in overtime, though, because I've seen it happen multiple times. Because they have the skill players, they're willing to fire away. Like Matthews is letting it go, right? Because he's got a shot. He's got a shot, and he's going to take it. You miss the net in the right spot, though, and next thing you know,
going the other way. It's
right. There's a 2-on-1 going, or 2-on-1 or breakaway or something going the other way. That's the problem. But you need the opportunity to possess the puck one way or the other, and they never even got that opportunity.
And you can't try to match skill with them because they're just going to outgun.
Well, it's not even, and I wouldn't even go match skill. Like in that overtime situation, it's not even just match skill. If you're going to make a line change, you better be sure you can do it with the speed that they're coming at you with. And that was the wrong time to change. Everything about that sequence was bad. Yep. So it is what it is. But
yeah, and you fall to Toronto on the road right before your Stadium Series game. Like, that's probably not a game you're supposed to win anyway. So the fact that you come and get a point is pretty nice.
Being in Toronto too, like your itinerary probably for the next day being we're getting to New Jersey and it's
right,
preparing for this whole thing and all stuff like that. Like I always I feel like I'd have to go back and look. I don't know it off the top of my head here, but when they played in Philly in the Stadium Series against Pittsburgh, I don't recall them playing 2 nights before that game to have the practice outside and do all that. It also makes a difference when it's two teams playing in an outdoor game and you can dedicate the whole thing to them instead of 4 over the course of a weekend.
That's true.
Like it's an even bigger spectacle.
It schedules things out a little differently.
Right.
Yeah.
How the New York Islanders practice on Thursday and play on Sunday.
Right. The other game this week was Monday against Arizona. It was kind of a back and forth game through 2 periods. Good entertaining hockey game,
but good win for a game that was clearly not 1,000% going your way. sometimes
we're
you're not
back
going
and
to play.
forth through the first two.
But sometimes you're not going to play perfect, and you need to win a game.
Yep.
You know, in different ways. Like that was the biggest thing that I got from that game was they've won a bunch of games in different ways recently, and that's what they're going to need to do in order to make the playoffs and keep this thing going. But
Yeah.
you know, again, you know, it was obviously like Arizona's not going anywhere this year, so it's
At this point
you
in
know.
time, Arizona is a team that if you have serious aspirations for the playoffs, you need to be beating Arizona at home on a Monday in February. Like you just have to win that game. Like, and they did.
Well, and
so go ahead.
The beauty of the beauty of like the 3 games that they had at home there, because that swept a homestand for what it's worth also,
Yes.
is that you know you played Winnipeg and won to sweep the season series with them. You came back and you beat Seattle. Like you know, the second time around you lost them in overtime on the back end of a back-to-back, but still 3 out of 4 points against them. And they're a team that may not make the play. Like Winnipeg's going to make the playoffs, so I don't want to say that. But like Seattle may not make the playoffs. They're in the hunt, but they may not. That's a good 3 out of 4 there to stay on course. You get 2 wins against Arizona. You know, like you got to let's put it this way. The next one I'm going to mention is Chicago. Like it's going to shift us to looking ahead because Chicago is one of these teams that you still have to play twice from the Western Conference. It's probably the only team from the Western Conference you have to play twice because you've already done all the other major West Coast trips.
All your travel, right?
Right. So, but for where they are, that's 4 points that you really need to get if you want to keep the playoff thing going because of the fact that they're out of it.
Yep. And I know it's something we talked about several weeks ago, but like the time is finally here. After you play Chicago on Wednesday, you're done leaving Eastern time. You can settle into your game times. Most of your games are going to start at 7:00. I know you got some weird weekend starts, but typically you can kind of get in the routine a little bit. You don't have to worry about any jet lag, any this, that, the other. Just focus on getting 2 points every night and making the playoffs.
And there's an element where this upcoming week is almost a mini bye week. Like you're still gonna be working, but the fact that you only have to play from the time you finish the Stadium Series game until the Saturday afternoon that follows, that you only have 1 game. This is the last stretch of the season. You're going to see that.
Yes. This is your last break before the playoffs start.
Like the fact that they can take Sunday as a complete day off. They'll practice Monday. I'm sure they'll, you know, maybe Tuesday they won't practice and they'll just have, you know, a travel day and then Wednesday have a morning skate and call it right there. You know what I mean? Or something like that.
And then, by the way,
Tortorella said he's got the whole week mapped out for what it's worth.
I'm sure he does.
Well, as a matter of fact, I'm going to actually check to see if they put a schedule out for that.
Okay. And then, by the way, when you come out of that, you know, kind of mini semi-bye week, you get a 3-4 Rangers, Penguins, Lightning. Good luck.
It is good luck, but that's what's going to define whether they are like it's one of these like these are the sequences. Like
put up or shut up. It's time.
Well, I got asked on 97.3 earlier in the week, is there, because this was after I had beaten Arizona, so they had won 4 in a row. The vibes were really high, right? And all that. And I got asked, am I convinced, or is there one stretch of this, or is there a stretch of the season where like it's still like this is going to tell me they're a playoff team? Right. And I actually didn't even say that one as much as I did. The trade deadline hits while they're on a Florida trip in between 2 games. They're going to play Tampa the first game after the deadline.
Okay.
And the game before that is the Florida Panthers, who, by the way, have like since the Flyers beat them, have been firing on all cylinders.
Man, you want to talk about stretches that prove if you're a playoff team? I just glanced ahead a little bit, and from March 14th to March 26th, they play Toronto, Boston, Toronto, Carolina, Boston, Florida, the Rangers. There's your stretch. That's it.
Well,
that's it.
I'm adding in the 2 Florida game or like the Florida Tampa games from right before that too.
Okay, that's valid.
Because to me, I sit there and I go, you've got 1 game that I consider a must win because it's the easiest opponent you've got.
Right.
If you do not win that San Jose game among all these others, good luck.
Yeah.
Like
trade everybody.
Well, they won't be able to by that.
I know.
But you know what I mean? Like I look at that stretch and I go, the San Jose's got to be a win and then find a way to split the rest of them. Meaning you give me 5 and
points out.
I'm serious. You give me 5 and 5 out of that stretch, they're probably making the playoffs.
I agree.
But,
I absolutely agree. And they've
I'm
done a good
I'm
job
sorry.
And they've done a good job of putting themselves in a spot where they don't have to get, 8 points out of that spree. They can get 5. Like they've done a good job of building a little bit of cushion.
Well, and I am curious about the fact that, like, yes, like you brought up this stretch of games that they're going to have this after they play Chicago, the Rangers, Penguins, and Tampa.
Yeah.
As a 3 and 4. Once that's over, your next 3 after are Washington, Ottawa, and St. Louis.
You need 5.
You need points.
There.
You need
points. At least 4 or 5 points.
Oh, no, right. I don't care. I'm not even trying to put a number on it. You just need points.
Yep.
Because after that is the gauntlet. And
March is going to be fun, man. Holy.
And this is the thing, though. It's what's going to show. Like, you're not going to tell me that watching the Toronto game earlier in the week that you're not excited about the Toronto game.
I'm thrilled to watch the Flyers play the Flyers play the Leafs twice in 5 days. That's going to be so much fun.
Right. But I'm saying going back to the one that they just played, that is they find a way to come back and get a point out of that game, that you're sitting there like even just getting it tied late and giving themselves a chance amps you up because of the fact that it's again another example of look at this really good team with all of these players. Austin Matthews is going off and they're in it.
Yep.
It's like that it makes such a difference. So
absolutely. They have shown that they can hang with the big dogs, and that is all you ask. And on that note, we will actually be taking a week off next week.
Are we? I didn't even know if we were.
Yeah, that's the week. We got some things going on. I'll be in Chicago on Saturday. Sunday we got a 2:30 game, so it's a bit of a funky time schedule for that. So
for you, it's 3:30 Eastern time.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to make sure for the viewers who are in
I'm sorry.
Yes, who may be confused by you saying that. That's all.
No, that is a 3:30 local time puck drop. Yes. So we got
it's on the road, so I don't care.
Yep, it's a bit of a funky week this next weekend. So we're actually just taking next week off. We will be back 2 weeks from now on March 3rd. Man, we got a lot of hockey between now and then. Like you said, a little bit of a mini bye week this week, but then they play a bunch of games before our next show. So we will have plenty to talk about. In the meantime, make sure to follow us on social media at YWT Podcast. You can stay up to date on everyday game stuff if you follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. You can find the show anywhere you find your podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com. Kevin, I think this was a pretty fun show. Is there anything else you wanted to add? One more for the road here?
No, nothing specific to add. Obviously, obviously the Stadium Series was a great experience. Not the result that everybody wanted, obviously. Maybe the Flyers should start declining outdoor game invitations like they should decline power plays, or something like that, because like
that's
one, I know it's technically a 1-4-1 record, but essentially 1-5 in outdoor games they just aren't your thing.
Maybe there's something to that. The good news is I don't think they're going to be scheduled for one anytime soon.
Well, they're not next. They're not next year. That's already been determined. I am, there's. But it is what it is. It's, it was one of those things or whatever. The way these games go, like at some point in time too, like there's nothing you can take from those games either. Like from a true hockey standpoint, like Tortorella called, like even said it at some point they're playing pond hockey out there, and he's not wrong. Like I thought that in the middle of the second period, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, this is so wide open. Like if you look back on the second period and the Flyers had 27 shots, but the Devils had 15 or 14. Is what it was.
Yeah,
and
it's 2 points.
And it's like this is wide open. It's not even like it's not even real hockey. Don't even watch it for defensive structure. Nobody's playing defense.
The 2 points would have been nice, but we're just playing shinny out there. So, all right. As I mentioned before, we will be back in just a couple of weeks. Follow us on the socials. All right. I don't think there's really much else to say. In 2 weeks, we will have a much better picture on whether the Flyers are going to be a playoff team or not, whether we like it or not. So, until then. We'll see you.